Hello, everyone that's in attendance. I want to thank you all for attending our panel discussion series. This is part 2 of Family, Children, and Remote Early Learning, Supporting Parents and Families. My name is Ross Nunamaker. I go by Chad, and I am the Executive Director and Communication Manager for Southwest Ohio AEYC, and I'll be facilitating today's panel discussion. And since this is a panel discussion, we cannot hear or see participants, so you do not need to worry about your mic or camera being on. And then during the session, you can submit questions either through the question and answer button in the bottom middle of your Zoom screen or through the chat, also in the bottom middle section of your Zoom screen. I want to start by thanking the sponsors of this discussion series, which are Butler County Educational Service Center, Miami Valley Child Development Centers, and C-Word Design. The Butler County ESC, or Educational Service Center, serves all the districts in Butler County, Ohio, and additional districts in neighboring counties, consisting of over 52,000 students. They are an ESC that believes in serving all families with children prenatal to 21 by being partners in shaping lives with schools, families, and communities. They provide a wide array of services, including Help Me Grow, early intervention and home visiting, central coordination for Ohio Department of Health prenatal to 3 for a 9-county region, special education preschool and state ECE, professional development, curriculum, and special services for schools and communities, education at the Butler County Juvenile Justice Center, which is graduating students every year, and alternative programming for students at Union Day. All these things are done with integrity, compassion, respect, and being family focused. The Butler County ESC has been a top workplace 7 years in a row. For more information, visit bcesc.org. Miami Valley Child Development Centers, Inc. serves more than 2,500 Head Start children at 63 sites and partner programs in Montgomery, Butler, Clark, Greene, and Madison counties. Over 80% of their programs are highly rated under Ohio's Step Up to Quality initiative, and they operate Ohio's largest early Head Start program. Based in Dayton, MVCDC employs more than 550 individuals, 10% of whom are former or current Head Start families. The division of Miami Valley Child Development Centers, Inc. the mission of Miami Valley Child Development Centers, Inc. is to deliver exceptional early childhood education and develop compassionate partnerships with families to support them in realizing their hopes and dreams. For more information, visit mvcdc.org. Are you having trouble with personalizing learning for struggling readers, especially for remote students? C-Word can help. C-Word provides evidence-based methods to develop the skill and will to read. From student-teacher apps such as C-Word School, which allows pre-K to first grade teachers to build their own lesson plans, personalize learning, and track results, to C-Words Anywhere that turns any digital content into an educational opportunity to help struggling readers of any age. We have the tools to help you and your students be successful. Learn more at c-words.com. So again, thanks to all of our sponsors. Now let's get to the panelists. We're very fortunate tonight to have 4 wonderful panelists. And panelists, please introduce yourselves when you see your picture appear.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jenni Jacobs. I've been in early childhood for about 26 years. I currently own and operate the Learning Professor, but in the past have been a preschool teacher, educational director, faculty at a university. So I've done lots of different kinds of things in that time, lots of working with parents as well.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel Konerman. I have spent most of my career as a classroom teacher at the Arlett Center, which is the laboratory preschool for the University of Cincinnati. I continue to serve there as their studio teacher, and I now spend most of my time teaching for the university's early childhood program, which licenses teachers for pre-K through 3rd grade, and I also train teachers who are in the field. And I'm also a really proud member of SWAYC as part of the Public Policy Committee.
Everybody, my name is Angie McDonald. I am currently working at Cincinnati Public Schools as a manager for the early childhood department, supporting all things quality and compliance related to preschool. I've been in the field for about 20 years, and like everybody else, I have a wide variety background. Been a classroom teacher and administrator, home visitor. I'm really looking forward to the conversation tonight.
Hello, I'm William Mosier. I've been in the field for over 30 years. I started out as a teacher of young children in a looped classroom. That means where I kept the same kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and third grade children and rotated every 3 years. So I taught there for 10 years. And then being from California, I went back home, worked on my doctorate, and was a Head Start and Migrant Head Start head teacher, then center director, then program director, and then project director for 13 counties up and down the state of California, and a consultant to the Child Development Department of the Department of Education for the state of California, and have been teaching college for 20 years. And I'm currently teaching in Istanbul, Turkey, as a professor of child development, where I work with refugee children from Syria, as well as the college students, of course.
All right, great. Thank you to all of our panelists for participating. So we're going to start with a framing of the conversation on supporting parents and families, and then we'll be moving through some of the questions that were submitted. And then throughout the panel discussion, as I said, feel free to submit questions through the Q&A or the chat. We may not have enough time to get to every question, but we'll certainly do our best. And some questions we may only provide a short answer for now that you're submitting in the Q&A, and then we might provide a more in-depth answer in one of our future panel discussions, because there will be some more of these in the future. So let's go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Chad, can you go ahead and launch the polls too?
Yeah, the first one and the second?
Yeah.
Right after?
Yeah, if we could do both of them, that would be great.
Yeah, sure.
So we'd
First
just
one's
like to
coming up
get
now.
an idea of who was on the first call, so we know what information you had that you've already had access to. So if you can let us know if you attended that first panel discussion. And then once Chad collects these results, we're going to do another poll just to get an idea of what your role is, and we'll talk about those results after we do this framing discussion. So I just wanted to get us started because tonight's discussion is all about supporting families through the process. And as we started getting questions in, as I started reading some of the responses, and just based on some of my own personal biases, I wanted to make sure that as we start this discussion tonight, that we take our teacher hat and really either replace it or combine it with a hat of compassion. Whenever we start talking about supporting families, I think it's really important that we see their world through their eyes instead of trying to see it always through our teacher eyes. And there's a couple of things that I think it's really important to remember when it comes to remote learning and supporting families. And one of those is that just like families are different in our face-to-face settings, some families are super involved and some are not very involved at all. You're going to find the same thing in your remote early learning. That's not going to change just because we move from face-to-face to online. I think it's also important to remember our developmentally appropriate practice and what we know about brain development and basic needs. And so one of the things that we know is happening right now is that families are struggling. You can turn on the news and you hear reports of child abuse reports going up. And so we know that parents are in stress. And when we think about something even as basic as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety and security come first, right? We have to make sure basic needs are met. Safety and security comes way before learning. And I think that's something that we have to remember as we start talking about supporting families. Sometimes our main goal is going to be making sure that people are in safe environments and that they have access to the resources that they need. I heard a great quote one time that the brain's primary job is not learning. The brain's primary job is survival, right? And so when the brain feels safe and secure, it's only then that it allows parts of itself to moonlight and learn. So if we really want children to learn, we have to remember that safety and security is first and foremost. So I wanted to, Chad, how about those results? All right, so we've got a lot of new people on the line tonight. That's great. All right, and can we go ahead and launch the next one too? And as you work on that poll, I'd like to get started on our first question. And Angie, I'm going to direct this to you first. As we start thinking about, helping families feel safe and secure and have the support that they need, I think one of the things that's really important to consider is connecting them to resources. So I wondered if you could address that a little bit.
Sure. So I think the thing that is really important for us to remember is that I don't know what community you're in. So I'm going to talk very specifically about how Cincinnati Public Schools supported families in connecting resources. But what I will say is that there are probably very similar things happening out in your communities as well. So just because I say Cincinnati Public Schools did something, I would check into your local public school to see what they were able to offer as well. So first I want to talk about that idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Everybody needs to feel safe and secure, and they also need to not be hungry. So one of the big resources that Cincinnati Public offered the community was to provide meals throughout the course of the pandemic. So from the middle of March, when this started, through the last day of school last week, Cincinnati Public Schools served over 240,000 meals to children and families who needed that. And so that was where we started because it was something that we knew we could provide. The other thing that we did was we tried to connect with some community partners. So one organization in Cincinnati that provided some support during those meal service times was Crayons to Computers, because we also knew not only did we want to feed the children and families, but we wanted to make sure that they had access to some educational materials and resources to take home with them, because as much as we provided online learning platforms and plans for every grade level, it was also really important that they had access to pencils and paper and other concrete materials to take with them to support what the teachers were doing online. I did also a little bit of research just to see what else was out there within the community. I know that the United Way did some significant support. I know that the Free Store Food Bank was offering lots of resources. But one thing that I think Cincinnati Public did really well, not only for the children and families, but also for staff, was to provide wellness checks. When we were unable to connect with a person for whatever reason, we would reach out. And sometimes that meant we would go knock on doors. And we were very fortunate to be able to have the resources to do that for our families and staff in our community. And so I think that was where we began. That was the beginning place for this time, and it worked really well. I think as we move forward, not yet knowing what the fall will look like, now is our opportunity to really begin to dig a little bit deeper into some of those other resources that maybe families don't need. Just like Jenny, you shared, it's going to be really important that we take our teacher lenses off and try to be side by side with our families, because we may not know what it's like to be hungry, but we can at least and not have access to food, but we can maybe connect them to some resources. I think the thing that's important to remember at this point when we take off our teacher lens is it doesn't matter who you are, asking for help is one of the hardest things to do. And so if we as educators can have a bank of things from within our community to be able to reach into our hat and just offer some suggestions generally to our whole group, I think that is something that we can really have as a starting place as we move forward to planning for the fall.
Yeah, I think those are all really awesome ideas. And, listening to you talk, I was just remembering back to when my own children were little. They're grown now, but, I was a single mom for many years, a teenage mom, and I didn't know that I could ask for help. I didn't know who to go to ask for help. And, now I think about that now as a teacher, and sometimes I get lost in the idea that, well, everybody knows there are food banks and there are, support systems and you can just go ask for things. But then when I think back to when I wasn't a teacher and I was just a parent, I had no idea those things existed. And there were many times when, we were eating, the cheapest can of food that we could find because it's all I could afford. And knowing that those resources were available, although it still would have been hard to ask, it would have been invaluable. And I think we have to not take for granted that families know that information.
I agree with you. And I think that's where I really want to push us as educators to think about our philosophical beliefs and how we approach and relate to families. Within Cincinnati Public Schools, we have the Head Start performance standards to guide us in our work, and so we're able to rely on that framework. And I don't necessarily think you have to have something that big or sometimes seemingly overwhelming as all of the performance standards. But yet, if you can have a conversation with your staff, with one another, with your teaching teams to say, what is it that we believe about what families need and how do we want to approach them in that? I think that's really important for us to slow down and ask those questions, because having the resources, honestly, I think that's the easy part. It's engaging in that relationship with the parents to be able to help them feel confident and comfortable enough to ask for them.
If you wouldn't mind, just to add a couple of things in on this part, I see we have a few administrators on with us, and I just want to mention, just like what Angie's talking about here, we had a really lovely relationship as teachers with our administrative staff, and as a center, we would send out a newsletter in addition to any communication that the teachers were sending to parents. And one each week in the newsletter would be a highlighted resource. And also anytime that a teacher felt there might be something that might need attention, we could always reach out to our administrative support for additional resources. And so we had a really nice working relationship that continued. And some of that came down to being really cognizant from the very beginning to set up those support networks. And so as we go into this time of shifting with whatever new normal is going to look like, I think it's going to be important that we have those same infrastructure supports in place so that everyone feels supported. And to not forget that we're talking about, in our field, teachers that don't always make a whole lot of money either, and that as teachers ourselves, it's okay to ask for help, right? And to also lean on each other and access the resources as we need to, and to look out for each other's mental health as well as our basic needs.
Yeah, so that might not have been where you thought we were going to go today when we were talking about supporting families and remote learning, but hungry children can't learn and stressed children can't learn. And that's why we really wanted to start off with, connecting families to resources. Let's go ahead and move to our next question. And we'd like to talk about how we can encourage family participation. And when we were preparing for this, I started thinking back to when I was a young single parent and I had my daughter in childcare. And if this had happened back then, I'm not sure that I would have seen the importance of putting her on a Zoom call. So if I take my teacher hat off and I really put on my parent hat from when my daughter was 18 months, 2.5 years old, my thought process at that time would have been, I am so stressed. I am so busy. Why in the world should I take time out of my day so that my kid can go watch somebody sing a couple songs on Zoom? Like, that's just not worth my time. And that's really where I would have been coming from. So I'm sure that, we talked a little bit about families are going to have different ideas about this whole remote learning. Some are going to be very involved, some are not. How would you get a parent like me who was really thinking, I don't understand this. Why would I get involved with this? Why would I take my time? How would you really get them to the table to see the importance of this?
So if you don't mind, the first thing I always try to remember and to remind teachers as we're talking is that to try to keep in mind at the front of your thinking that all parents really want to do their best for their children. Even if we have a different idea of what's best for their children, deep down, that's what they want. We all know there's a few exceptions. We're not talking about them. We're talking about deep down what they really want, and helping parents to see, speaking of what's best for your children, helping parents to see that what they can do. I was using her water beads as my laptop support. Real life, right? But helping parents to see that these kinds of things really will help their children grow in so many ways. And sometimes what it takes is helping them understand what is behind. I call it kind of like pulling back the curtain on play a little bit so that they can understand the philosophical and the, no, trivia is over. And the developmental purpose of some of the things that we plan for our classrooms. So if you're talking about a Zoom call where somebody's just singing to children, then maybe at the beginning of the week, you have a conversation with the parents where you say, these are the language skills and the communication skills and executive function skills that are supported. I'm going to mute for a sec.
One of the things that I also thought about when we started talking about encouraging family participation is that we really have no idea what's going on in every family's home. How many children are on other kinds of Zoom calls? How many people are working from home and may have meetings to attend? And so I think that it's really important to offer flexibility on your timing of things. Offer meetings at different times of day so that parents can join in. Record your meeting so that if parents can't make it to the live recording, they can watch it later on. And so I think allowing for that is another great strategy. Angie, what ideas do you have?
Well, I think that flexibility piece is really important, and putting my mom hat on, I have 5 children who still live in my home, and we had Zoom calls that overlapped and our internet bandwidth wouldn't always support all 7 of us because my husband also works from home, being on at the same time. And so that flexibility piece is really important. As I think about very specifically your question related to how would I connect with the mom who's feeling really frustrated, I think there's something to be really said for the need for social connections, not only for the children, but also for the adults in their lives. And I found myself feeling somewhat overwhelmed by not having some of the routine adult contact that I would have in my day, whether that was with a coworker who sat near to me in my cubicle, or whether it was with a mom friend that I would meet for lunch. I didn't get those interactions. And so if I think about that, I know others also aren't having their normal type interactions where they have a minute, maybe vent about the frustrations of being a parent, because those frustrations and those difficulties don't go away just because we're on a stay-at-home order. And so acknowledging that this is really hard and allowing them the opportunity to maybe just breathe for a minute and helping them, if we can, you know, sometimes you have to kind of explain to them, yes, the importance is play. And do you realize when they're there, you might get 5 minutes to go to the bathroom by yourself. And that should be okay too. We can't always help parents have the motivation that we want them to have around completing the tasks that we're asking for. But what we can do is help them see how it can benefit them, and ultimately that benefits their child.
Exactly. You know, I think in some ways, encouraging family participation is a lot like marketing. If you're going to market a new product, you have to talk about the benefits. And you have to talk about the benefits in a way that is really productive for the person that's going to be consuming it. So if we want families to engage in our remote early learning with their children, we have to sell the benefits not only for the child, but also for the parent. How does this benefit you as a parent to have your child participate in this? How does this then benefit your child? Because if we're not getting parent buy-in, then we're not going to be able to give any benefits to the child either.
There's a term in like the marketing field, right? Like, what's in it for me? So helping the parents see what's in it for me. And it could be during like maybe Zoom happy hours with parents, or, you know, one-on-one calls. And you can absolutely capitalize on those social moments to help them understand what they can gain by promoting play, and by what play can provide for their children, including a little bit of reprieve from the need of adult attention. If a child is able to play independently in a place that is safe and full of materials that are appropriate for them, then the parent gets, you might not be able to totally tune out because they'll still want to know you're around, but that constant interaction between the adult and the child, that I will let you know, can become exhausting very quickly. No matter how much you love your child.
Yes. I think it's almost also important to make sure that we're communicating with families in ways that work for them. It doesn't always have to be just through whatever platform we happen to be using. We can use regular old mailings. We can use Marco Polo. You know, if you have a family that really can't do the Zoom meetings, but you want to touch base with them, you could use Marco Polo to send videos back and forth and carry on that conversation. Texting. Some families don't use email the way that we do as teachers sometimes. So texting. And I actually just saw an article today online. Rachel and I were having this conversation not too long ago. Why are we so exhausted from Zoom meetings? And this article was actually about that Zoom meetings there's something different about the social communication that happens during a Zoom meeting. And because it's interrupting that normal communication, that's why we have Zoom fatigue. So really thinking about, you know, what kind of platform we're using, and thinking about different kinds of opportunities to connect with families. And Rachel, you had a really great idea about the mailing aspect. Can you talk about that?
Sure. There's so much about mail that sometimes we forget about because we're in a much faster society now where we want things so quick. But some of the things that we found to be so helpful about mail was that it instantly would bring attention to whatever it was that you sent in the mail. The children were excited to get it. The parents were excited, something besides a bill. And you can mail a lot of just support kinds of things in a package that doesn't have to cost a whole lot or be really heavy. Some of the things that we had some great success mailing was, one teacher mailed postcards within the package, there were these postcards that were pre-addressed and postage paid, but on the other side they were blank, and the children could make artwork with whatever media they had in the house, painting, drawing, whatever, then sent them back to the teacher, who put them together in a mural that then they showed on the Zoom group time. So it was a really nice way to tie in a lot of different, curricular content areas, and then bring it back around to that Zoom group time, which then led to engagement in that group time. It was a really neat example. Other examples were things like Then we had some games that were sent that helped promote math skills that then came along with a little bit of parent information so they could understand how playing the game would promote math skills. Some other like literacy sort of supports, a little book or some special paper to write on and then write back. One classroom did pen pals where parents exchanged addresses with each other and then they mailed letters back and forth to promote literacy. And so there were just lots of examples of things like that that were just really great ways to tie it all in. And it didn't have to be a mailing every week to keep the excitement and the engagement, but about once every few weeks really seemed to be really impactful. And it made a little bit of excitement. You know, everybody likes to get fun mail, and just kind of like brightened up their days when things were starting to get a little monotonous. We overlook old-fashioned mail all the time.
Yeah. You mentioned something a bit ago, and I wanted to circle back around to that. And Bill, I know this is really your passion, so I'm going to let you get us started on this one. But I think one of the key things that we can do to support parents with early remote learning is to really help them support play in the home environment. You know, really helping them with specific strategies that they can use at home, helping them understand how to create sort of a yes environment where it's a safe environment where the children aren't going to be getting into things and they can really just play, and how that benefits children, how to make it work for them. So I know that's your really passionate topic, is supporting play. So could you get us started on that?
Who?
You.
Okay, all right. I guess I didn't hear that part. A child's work is play, and it's so important for the adults in the lives of a child to appreciate that the most effective way for a child to learn anything is through play. So it might be helpful for us to think about two things in terms of how education staff, the adults that work with young children in an early care and education setting can be more supportive to parents when parents are already busy in their daily life, to help them relax and just simply play with their children. The first point is that a parent really doesn't want to know how much I know until they know how much I care about them as a person. And so it is absolutely of utmost importance to show how much we respect the parent as a vital part of that child's life. And it is only after the parent sees me as a friend as opposed to the teacher that they then can be more responsive to thoughts about the importance of play in the life of a young child and how to facilitate child-directed play, to allow the child to, in his or her environment, pick the things they want to play with, and then the adult just support the child's play by doing things that can be stimulating language and cognitive development through the use of language. So let's just imagine that a child is working on a puzzle. Rather than interfering with the child working on the puzzle, the adult, the parent, the child care provider, could simply reinforce the child learning language for what he or she is doing, such as stating what you're observing the child doing. Oh, I see Johnny putting that round puzzle piece on the template, or whatever the child is doing. I see Johnny lifting his cup and drinking some milk out of his cup. So that the role of adults, why children are being adults, practicing all the play that a child is doing is basically role playing, being us. And in the experience of attempting to be an adult when you're only 3 years old, you're going to maybe mess something up or get something dirty. So adults have to be very patient when they're allowing children to learn through discovery as they're playing.
Thank you.
I totally agree with what you're saying there. It's just sometimes, sorry, she's still close by. I was listening to, I tuned into a webinar today with Teacher Tom, and I'm not sure, to me, he's like a celebrity in ECE world. And I was talking to some people the other day and they were like, what? And it was a great reminder to think about some of the things that parents might not know what to do, that we all know because we are trained in how to value play and how to support play and all of the things that we know play can do. I'm going to help her off the chair. Hang on.
When I went on vacation before all of this pandemic hit with one of my friends that has a little baby, and she had brought all of these toys along with her, and she found it so frustrating that I would find random household objects like a water bottle or a pot with a wooden spoon, and I kept giving her baby new things like that to play with, and the baby was more fascinated by those objects than by the toys. And I think that's something that we can help parents understand, is that they don't have to have all kinds of fancy objects and things to support play with their children, that they just have to give children different kinds of things to explore.
That was one of the points Teacher Tom made too, sorry, is that so often we think we need to provide the right activity to get them to learn something, or the right toy to get them to do this thing. When usually if we would flip it a little bit, and when I didn't know if we'd have K-3 teachers on here or not, but that's one of the great things that works with that grade too, is like we kind of flip it, and instead of imagining ourselves as the one that has to dispense all of the knowledge upon the child, we begin to see the child as a protagonist in their own learning, and then see ourselves as the supporter, and we can follow along with them. All of a sudden we can see all these opportunities for all of our lesson plans and standards and everything to get met if we're prepared for it. And since what we need is to help the parents understand that, then I think, and we can't throw it all at them at once. We can't expect them to have our 10, 18, 25, whatever years of experience under their belt, but we can help them little by little to see the importance and the quality of child's play, and to help them expect a little mess in it, that it might look dirty, really literally dirty, and it might look emotionally messy, right? And that at school we're working through social emotional mess all the time, so to expect it at home, right? And that was one way that we found to be really supportive of our parents too, was to help them with those things, individually and in small groups. Sorry, Angie, I think I cut.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to share that I recently read an article. I was doing some research into the topic of homeschooling, thinking about all of the resources that parents who choose to do school at home every day with their families have. And I came upon a topic called unschooling. And it's this idea that when you connect the daily life of the child to the learning experience, it just naturally happens. So that could be preparing a meal. That could be setting the table. That could be taking a walk outside. And you start to, I think we as educators could really capitalize on this idea of talking to families about what happens during their day and helping them understand how maybe just through a little additional conversation or an extra probe here or there, that they would be that facilitator of learning for their child. And so we may not be able to lesson plan the way we're accustomed to because of what may or may not happen in the fall. And what I'm thinking about is, when I was an infant teacher, I had to do individualized lesson plans because that was what was in the best needs and interests of the baby. And I'm thinking about how can we do some individualized planning for our families based on what we know about their daily life. And so that goes back to what we discussed last time, all around building that relationship and setting up that trust, so that teachers feel comfortable sharing with, parents feel comfortable sharing with us what's happening, so that we can start to connect the dots, because we have the knowledge of the educational piece. They have the knowledge of their daily life and their child.
Do you ever feel like we almost have to give parents permission to enjoy their children a little bit? Like, this is a time where if we flip it a little, they have a unique opportunity to be with their child and children all day long, right? Which can be really stressful, but it can also be really beautiful. And we get to be in the front seat with them in places that we don't always get to be, right? Front row seat is what I meant to say. And so sometimes if we can just help the parents even shift their mindset a little bit, that could relieve stress, and it could encourage them to see all the opportunities that they have right there, and then help them see themselves as an active partner with us rather than us presenting to them what they should be doing.
And we can't take it for granted that parents understand the learning opportunities that happen during all of the daily routines. I remember I had a family one time, and both parents were just wicked smart. And they were talking to me one day, and they were talking about reading physics books to their child as a bedtime story. And I started asking more questions. And I happened to ask them about dinner time, and she said, oh, we take turns fixing dinner, and we keep the children away from the kitchen so they stay safe. And so I started having the conversation about all of the learning opportunities around fixing dinner. And the mom went, huh, I never thought about that before. So we can't take for granted that they understand how much of an opportunity that is. So we could stay here all night long, but I want to get us to the next question and really talk about how we can help reduce stress for families and children. One of the things that I think we have to remember is we would love if parents really saw all of this as a gift, like Rachel was saying. But then in many ways, there are so many things going on right now that it is just stressful. I work from home all of the time. So for me, one of the things I realized is that my basic life is a quarantine. It didn't really change that much. And I thought it wasn't affecting me until one day I realized all I do is look in the refrigerator constantly. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's my anxiety coming up. Like, I actually am stressed about all of this that's going on, and I didn't even realize it. And my life didn't change that much. So for some of these families, life has just, as they know it, has just been uprooted. So how can we really help families? If we take the children sort of out of the picture and the focus on helping them learn out of the picture, how can we support the families in these times of stress?
I think the first thing that we have to do is be able to provide that bank of resources from within the community. And so whether it's a one-page document that you prepare as a list to just proactively hand out to everybody, or as you reopen, if it's a bulletin board that you set up that has a variety of things that are specific to your community, I think that's a good beginning. I think the next step really is about making sure that you're connecting and building those relationships so that you can start to recognize what stress may look like for them. If we're in a position where children come back part-time or maybe not at all, and we have to go through a blended scenario in the fall, I think those are things that are going to be really important for us to start with. And then, as Jenny was talking earlier about helping families connect daily life to learning so that they don't feel like there's another thing they have to do to feel successful. I mentioned I have 5 children, and there were days where at the end, I was completely done trying to make sure that everybody got on the right Zoom and that everybody was prepared with the materials that they needed, that our internet didn't fall to pieces, and I didn't have worries about if I was going to have groceries in my refrigerator. So I think when you add on some of those basic needs, in addition to having to want to do the best for your child, but maybe not being quite sure how, I think that it all goes back to flexibility and approach. And how are we going to adjust our lens so that we can meet the needs of whatever funder or educational institution that we need to, so that it betters the families.
Absolutely. I think it's also important when we are offering resources to parents to do it on a regular basis, but to be mindful that when we offer too many resources or too many choices at once, it becomes very overwhelming and people are more likely to pull back and not make a choice at all. And so to really, you may have tons and tons of ideas, but rather than posting 10 ideas a day, post 2. And let parents choose. And the next day, post 2 more and let parents choose 1, so that they don't feel like there's so much on their plate that they have to do.
And let them know that you'll keep them all contained in one space that they can always access again later, but also giving just that little bit of a drip effect, no matter what resource it is that you're recommending, whether it's all the incredible things that are out there now that we can have children access, or it's a community service that they might want to access. I think piecing those all out over time so that it's not overwhelming, and letting them know no matter what, you can always come back to our central hub to find it all, helps to alleviate a little of that stress too.
And one of the things that we talked about on the first call, and it is available online so you can go back and listen to it again, but we talked about the importance of the teaching, and the Zoom calls for the children, and always being the teacher that they have the relationship with. But when it comes to working with families, one of the things that I think we can do to help reduce stress for families is collaborate with some of the other teachers and offer a portal of support, especially behavioral support. Maybe if a teacher has a certain expertise in bedtime rituals, she could offer a pre-recorded message that parents could listen to. And I think offering those kinds of supports are really important. Offering, a happy hour, maybe without the drinking, but something for parents to kind of get on a call where they're not getting on with their children, but they're getting on with each other to support each other and to see that they're not in this alone, to get that support. I'm really struggling with this. What can I do? And maybe providing, a few opportunities a week for parents to join a call and just get help if they need it. So let's go. We are running short on time, so let's move to the next question. How can remote early learning be used to support or to promote social and emotional development and support? We really talked a lot about this on the first call, and I think that we have to remember our why. Why are we doing this? And we have to remember that the most important component of any kind of remote early learning is to build relationships. And anytime we're building relationships, we're supporting social and emotional development. What are some other tips that you have? Maybe just 5 minutes, we can talk about this for really promoting that social emotional support.
Well, I think that it cannot be overemphasized that before a child has readiness to learn something cognitively, they have to feel emotionally safe, as was stated before. And the whole idea of social interaction being a pivotal piece in learning makes us look at the importance of social emotional supports of utmost importance before we even think about trying to provide some piece of learning that's on a cognitive level for young children. So how do we promote social emotional support, not just to the children, but also to the parents? And there's just no way around the fact that because parents are the child's first teacher, It's important that we communicate clearly to parents that we are there to support them emotionally, that we want to maintain a healthy social relationship with them so that we can provide them the supports that will then allow them to be more relaxed in engaging in playful activities with their children.
I also think it's really important, as we're talking about that, to help parents understand within the, like you were just mentioning, within the context of that supportive relationship, help parents understand what's developmentally appropriate for children, especially in the realm of social emotional development. I feel like a lot of parents take their cues from what they remember from growing up, what they see in the media, and don't always have strategies for working with their children, whether it's through challenging behaviors or just typical everyday stuff, and helping them really understand what's developmentally appropriate, what should your 2-year-old be doing to establish autonomy, you know, what should your 3-year-old be doing to test limits. These are things we know are going to happen, and because they're going to be with their children for more time, they're going to see more of it without necessarily the reprieve of another adult to also help with those things. And so just helping them learn, A, what's appropriate, and B, some of the basic strategies that we use all the time in the classroom that then they can start to use at home with their children. And, you know, letting them know that keeping that consistency will actually serve their child well when they come back to school too. So if you understand how to use natural consequences well, then you can use them when you're, you know, managing some behavior at home or setting limits or something like that, and help you stay calm and weather the storm that you might have. I mean, we all know 3-year-olds that can throw epic tantrums, right? And so just helping a parent understand that that's normal, that that's okay. That doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It doesn't mean your child is bad or not advanced enough, and then help them work through that and help them understand even the value in the messiness of social emotional development. And then I also think those one-on-ones can really be supportive for parents too. So we talked about one-on-ones with children, but one-on-ones with parents too, to help them just kind of, I mean, how many of y'all in parent conferences have already been a therapist anyhow, right? Like a family therapist, helping bounce off ideas anyway. So that just kind of like doing that a little bit too, just to help them understand what's normal and how to weather that.
So I think we have time for one more question before we end this evening. And so I think we actually answered our next question in some of our previous conversations. Our next question was going to be, how can we support families who don't respond to our outreach or those who are working full-time remotely? And I think we covered a lot of strategies for that when we were talking about, you know, offering different times and mailings and those kinds of things. So I promised that I would get to this question on our last call, and I want to make sure we do it. How can we support children and families with special needs? One of the things that I think is really important is that we remember as teachers that children with special needs are just children. They're children first, and we teach them in the same way that we teach all children. We look at where they are developmentally and we do the next best thing, right? What are some other strategies? We have about 2 minutes, so we're going to make this real quick, but what are some other strategies that you guys can think of? We're working with families with special needs.
Angela, were you going to say something? I didn't want to.
You know, I think there was a shift for me in my teaching experience, and it was when I realized that children and families were a package deal. And I feel that really compelled to say that, especially as we talk about families who are supporting children who may have a disability. To remember that they are going through some of probably the most difficult challenges because their support systems that they're accustomed to are probably not as present. And that's a really challenging time for any family, but specifically for families who have children with disabilities. I think we really need to help, again, just families acknowledge that they know their child best and that they have the resources and to be present with that parent to make sure that and just reinforce that they know what to do for their child.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to remember that they will be likely overwhelmed. And so to try to do whatever we can to mitigate that a little bit, and also helping them realize that they are their child's best and first advocate. And so if they need more support, to reach out to their specialists, to reach out to their support team from the school, so that they can make sure that they're getting what they need.
Yeah, I think we can also offer some one-on-one support to parents for, observations, one-on-one support for helping them get through the next challenge, coaching them on how to scaffold their children's learning and development, and really working on those kinds of things with them as well. But I think first and foremost, I love what you said, Angie, about, they're a package deal and really working with the parents and not just focusing on the child. I think that's such an important thing to remember. So we have had a great discussion tonight. We are already at our hour though, so I'm going to turn things back over to Chad to wrap us up for tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. I think this was a great discussion. Definitely made me think about some of the things that I've done in the past with parents, especially related to one-on-one support and walking them through, problem solving skills and that coaching relationship. But like you all said, it starts with the relationship that we have with the parent. And then when we can help them improve their relationship with their child, that improves not only outcomes for the child, but it reduces their stress, and all of these things kind of tie into one another. So. Alrighty, so I just want to give you some information on some other upcoming virtual events that we have. If you need professional development hours, please check out our free Ohio approved and Kentucky DCC approved trainings conducted by Dr. Jenni Jacobs, who's on this call right now. These occur on various days and times with the sponsor limited, so you can register at bit.ly/SWO, free, OA. Part 3 of this webinar series will be next Thursday, which is June 4th at 6 p.m. And we're going to be focusing on technology and young children. And we'll be discussing topics related to screen time, using technology with young children and their families, things like that. And we'll have more information on how to register for that very soon. So be on the lookout for an email from Swayze, or be sure to check out our Facebook and Twitter pages. And then we've also been conducting some reopening work groups. These have been really popular with program directors and administrators who are planning to reopen soon. We have one more reopening work group this week, which is tomorrow, Friday at 10:30 a.m. And we will be focusing on making plans in case of COVID-19 exposure. And you can learn more about that and register at bit.ly/all lowercase SWOROWG. And I will put that in all information on all 3 of those in the chat right now, so you can grab those URLs if you need them. And that concludes part 2 of our panel discussion on families, children, and remote early learning. So thank you to all of our attendees, panelists, and sponsors. And remember, information on part 3 will be sent via email and social media very soon, within the next few days. So keep an eye out for that. And if you have any questions, please email us at info@swayze.org. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye from me and my daughter and my husband.